In this episode, I want to share with you my story of how I got my first job fully in English. Hey everybody, how's it going? Thiago here, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. In case you're new here, I've created this podcast and YouTube channel to help intermediate and advanced learners of English communicate with more confidence, more accuracy, more clarity, and more awareness. If this sounds like something you want for yourself and your English, subscribe to the channel here on YouTube and follow the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts so you don't miss a single new episode. Registrations for my conversation club are officially open, so if you are available at 7:30 p.m. BRT every Tuesday for live classes, and if you are already at an intermediate level of English and you are looking for a safe space to practice speaking with me and other learners once a week on a live call, I'm going to leave the link here in the description of the video, in the pinned comment below, and also in the show notes on Spotify for you to learn more about how you can join the Conversation Club. And of course, don't forget to also check out my pronunciation course. This is a recorded course that I've created to help you learn the main sounds of the English language and the main connected speech patterns that you see native speakers using in movies, series, podcasts, and in real life. Having this knowledge will help you speak with more clarity, better flow, and also better understand fast spoken English. Again, the link is in the description here of the video, in the pinned comment, and also in the show notes for you to learn more about it and consider buying it. It's a great course. All right, so today is story time because I want to share with you how I got my first job in English that was fully in English. This was a job that required me to speak English 100% every day. So I want to share with you this experience because I think that when it comes to reaching English fluency, each person's journey is different. So it's valuable for you as a learner to learn about other learners' struggles, successes, and what they did to achieve a certain level of fluency in the language, because then you can draw inspiration from these stories. You can maybe draw some insights that you can apply also in your own life, in your own English learning. So that's why I'm going to share with you this particular experience of mine. You know, I've been teaching English now most of my life for many, many years. And being an English teacher requires me to use English every single day for work. But before becoming a teacher, I actually had another job that required me to speak English 100% every day, which was at a call center. I was a customer service representative for 1 year. And that was my second job. I was 19 years old when I got it. Okay? So I want to share with you how I actually got it. All right? And what was my context back then. So first of all, let me give you a brief overview of my English back then. So I was 18 going 19. Okay? And at that point, I had already been studying English for about 3 years. I had started at 15, so it had been around 3 years already that I was studying English. But the first 2 years were spent mostly studying English with grammar books and course books. I didn't have a lot of opportunities to speak the language back then. All right, so I didn't practice my speaking for the first 2 years, I would say. The first 2 years for me were all about input, mostly input and books, okay? But then I got my first job at 18 at a drugstore, and I worked at that drugstore for almost 2 years. And when I got the second job at the call center, I had already been working at the drugstore for a little over 1 year. And that drugstore was surrounded by hotels. So it wasn't uncommon for us to have foreigners, people who were traveling and visiting São Paulo, my hometown, walking in the store and needing help, and they didn't speak Portuguese. So since I was the only person there that spoke some English and that studied English, I was always the one who helped those customers see what they needed, charge them at the cash register, that kind of stuff. So the first 2 years of my English learning journey were not spent speaking so much. But then this first job allowed me to start interacting and actually using my English in real life with these customers. So I started to gain a little bit of speaking practice sporadically. They were random interactions. It wasn't anything continuous or frequent, as a matter of fact. Okay? But I remember that I wanted a job, I wanted to find work that would make me able to use English every day. I wanted to be able to work fully in English every day for a couple of reasons. First of all, because I knew that getting a job in English was the only way I was going to gain more immersion in the language for myself, because I didn't have the means to go on a exchange program, for example, or enroll in a course, so I knew that the only way to gain more exposure would be to get a job, that was the only way. But also, I thought it was something cool, I thought it was cool, the idea of speaking English every day for work and getting paid for it. For me, that was like amazing. Just to imagine getting paid to speak English every day. That's what I wanted. I wasn't really sure what I was going to do in terms of work, but that's what I wanted for myself at that time, to speak English every day. But then there was a problem. How was I going to do it? There I was at 18 years old. I was working at this drugstore, my first job, pretty much doing everything there, minding the cash register, dusting off shelves, cleaning up bathrooms and toilets. I did everything, But then how was I going to do it? How was I going to get this job that I wanted so much fully in English? Keep in mind that this is crazy, man. Keep in mind that this was back in 2005, guys. That was in 2005, okay? And, it's crazy for me nowadays to think about it, because a person who was born in 2000 nowadays is 24 years old. When I think about that, it just makes me feel old and ancient, But what are you gonna do, right? That's life, yeah? But anyway, I digress. So keep in mind that was back in 2005. So in Brazil, back then, we already had the internet, but it wasn't high-speed internet. We still used, at least I used, in 2005, I was still using the dial-up internet. The dial-up internet connection, remember, is that connection that needs your phone, your landline phone at home to connect. And it was really slow. It made those weird noises when trying to connect. And it was really expensive too, because your phone bill increased if you stayed online for a long time. So it wasn't common back then to look for jobs online. Yeah, nowadays it's crazy because, most of the job hunting that happens nowadays is online, right? We have platforms like LinkedIn, for example. You get jobs on LinkedIn. You also have websites that are designed for job seekers, right? But back then, it wasn't a thing yet, looking for jobs on the internet, because, the internet was not so advanced back then yet. But then once I was at the drugstore, just another day working, and I was behind the counter, and I remember that it was a really slow day in terms of customers. And then I saw a newspaper laying around. And then I grabbed it, and then I started flipping through the newspaper. And then I saw this big ad, this huge ad on the classified section, It had a picture of a headset, and it said something along the lines of, "Do you speak English fluently? Work for an international company remotely," something like that. And then there was a phone number. And then that caught my attention. And the next day, I actually called that number just to see what was going to happen. And then to my surprise, it wasn't a real person that answered. It was an automated machine. It was an automated message. And basically, that was already the first part of the selection process. It was kind of a screening interview, let's say, because the automated message asked you, I think, 3 questions. And after each beep, you had to record your answer to those questions. So that's what I did. I got a little scared at first because I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting to talk to a real live person. But, I took a deep breath, and after each question, I answered, recorded my answers, and then I hang up the phone. All right? And then, to my surprise, a few days later or a few weeks later, I actually got called to the process. The process pretty much involved going to an interview, this time with a live person. I remember it was an interview in English and then another one in Portuguese. Okay. And then if I passed that interview, then I would go on I think it was a 2-week training. And in that 2-week training, you would learn the technicalities of the work, how to do the work, how to operate the system they used. And get this, we even had English pronunciation training during those 2 weeks. It was really cool. I think the company had hired a teacher back then. I don't know if she was a teacher or some sort of pronunciation coach, but she had very good English. And part of the training before getting the job or starting to work actually involved English learning. She gave us some pronunciation tips, also some common phrases we would use, in the day-to-day work. And then I remember that I was sitting in that training and I was like, man, this is amazing. Here I am in my home country, right? In Brazil, applying to get this job, this work that is fully in English. And I'm having a training and learning English in the process. I'm getting some pronunciation tips here, some useful phrases from my vocabulary. I remember being mind blown with that idea, with that thought, But anyway, I finished the training and I passed, and then I got the job. I got the gig. And I remember that I didn't think twice. I quit my job at the drugstore right away. And I was actually very happy and excited to do it. And I wasn't going to make much money. I think in today's standards, I was going to make around $250 a month, So it wasn't a lot of money, but keeping in mind that that was almost 20 years ago and that I was 19 and still living with my parents, that was more than enough for me. I didn't have the burden of owning a house, paying for bills back then, because I still lived with my parents, So I didn't think twice, It was a little bit more money than I was making at the drugstore. And I was so happy with the mere fact that I was going to be able to, speak English every day for work, that I just quit my job at the drugstore right away. And the job at the drugstore was very physical also because, you had to stand up a lot. Like I told you now, we did everything there, We minded the cash register, we cleaned toilets, we, carried boxes of, medication and stuff around, checking the stock, So it was a very physical type of work. So I was excited with the fact that I was going to work with something more, let's say, more with my brain, that wasn't so physical. And I was going to work speaking English, and that was awesome. By the way, I haven't told you yet what the job involved. So it was a job at a call center. And basically it was an American company that provided cable TV services, internet services, phone services in the US, and they outsourced part of the customer service in Brazil at the time. So we were supposed to handle American customers' calls whenever their cable TV or internet service was down. And we were supposed to, do some troubleshooting a little bit with them, see if it helped and if it worked. And if it didn't work, we would schedule a technician's visit. All right. But it was an interesting job because I was speaking on the phone with American customers 6 hours a day, 6 days a week, and I stayed there for a year. As far as challenges go, I would say that understanding some of the customers was a challenge, especially at first, depending on the region in the US the customer was from. Sometimes it was really hard to understand the person, and they would speak incredibly fast. So I can relate to maybe your frustration sometimes when you listen to something, a video or a podcast, and you think that it's just too fast. I understand that. I've been through that. Okay. And even though I was excited and happy for getting that job, it had, its stressful moments. Yeah, it wasn't a glamorous job, at least not as glamorous as I thought it would be. I remember that 95% of the customers were nice and polite, but unfortunately, there were a few rude customers. And my English pronunciation wasn't so developed yet back then. So I think it was easier to spot that I wasn't an American, So whenever this rude customer would notice that I wasn't an American, he or she would ask me, "Where are you located?" And then I would say, "Oh, I'm located in Brazil, sir." And then they would go, "I want to speak to an American agent. I don't want to speak to you." Like that. But it was impossible to connect the customer with an American agent, We were what they got. Yeah. So we had to convince the customer that, we could solve their problem. We were fit and qualified to, solve their issue. And some customers accepted it and others didn't. They would just, hang up the phone in your face. So that wasn't a lot of fun. Plus, the work itself was really intense, I would say, because it was 6 hours a day and we only had a 15-minute break. So the other 5 hours and 45 minutes, we had to be on calls. We had to be on the phone. And it was one call after another, and there were floor supervisors walking around and making sure that we were always on a call. If you took a long break in between calls, that was a problem, So the minute you ended a call, you had to pick up the next one right away, So it was intense in that sense, and it was stressful. Sometimes, understanding some customers and dealing with rude customers as well. And also something that I didn't like was selling back then, because we were the support desk. We were supposed to solve problems and help get the cable back on or the internet back on, okay? But we were also supposed to sell, to push some sales, Something like, "Oh, sir, by the way, I can see here that you have this package with us. Are you happy with your current package? Because I have a better package here for you to upgrade." So we were supposed to do that type of work as well, like pushing the customer to upgrade their combos, their packages. And I remember that I hated that. Nowadays, I feel much more comfortable with sales and selling. I sell my products here. I sell my courses, my coaching programs, my conversation club, no problem. But back then when I was 19, I remember I hated doing this, and it was also very stressful for me. One tip I can give you about this, guys, is be okay with selling, actually learn to sell. this is a crucial skill, learn sales. Yeah. Because we are always selling, you might not be selling a product or a service, but you are selling yourself. You are selling your image. You are selling your ideas, yourself as a person, as an individual worth taking seriously, So learn sales. It's really important. But back then I hated it and it was really, really stressful. But that job also had some positive things for me, First of all, it was great for my speaking and listening skills. Again, I stayed there for about a year, talking to American customers on the phone, 6 hours a day, 6 days a week. So that was really good to develop my speaking skills and my pronunciation and my listening skills. Also, I would say that that was a great experience for my resume. Back then, I was young. I didn't have much experience when it came to work. So that experience already boosted my resume because, it was an experience that was fully in English. So it was already easy for me to prove that I had a good level of English because I had just spent the last year speaking English every day. Yeah, so that was a great experience to boost my my resume at the time. And I would say that this job was also a great stepping stone for me because after that job, I started teaching English right away. And then when I became a teacher, that was the type of work that I really enjoyed doing. Then I found myself. I was like, oh yeah, that's it. Because before I wanted to be able to use English every day for work, but I wasn't sure how I was going to do it. The first experience was at the call center. I was using English every day, but it was a tough job and it was stressful. But then after that job, I started teaching and then I really enjoyed it. It was what I really felt I was supposed to do. It allowed me to use English every day and I was helping people learn the language. And that's why I've been doing it till this day. I never stopped, But that job, that first English job at the call center, served as a stepping stone for me. A stepping stone is that important experience that is not the final definitive experience, but it is a transitional moment for you. It's a moment of transition. It's a moment of learning and developing. It's like you have to go through that moment first before moving on to the next thing, which is better. So that's what happened to me. And then I became a teacher and I've been doing it ever since. That is actually another story that I can share here on the podcast another day, in another episode. How I became a teacher, what I like about it, how to become a teacher. So I can talk about that in a future episode. But that job at the call center was definitely a milestone for me, with all the challenges, with all the stress. It was worth it, because it was a stepping stone. So I think the biggest takeaway that I want you to take from this story is that it's important that you think about your career, your professional career strategically, because sometimes there is an offer in front of you for a position and it might not be so attractive. Maybe the pay is not so good. Maybe the work itself is not what you really want, or what you're really looking for, But if you are strategic, you might realize that that experience is going to be essential for you to develop more skills so that then you can move on to do that thing that you really want to do. So I think that some jobs in life, some work that we do in life, they serve as stepping stones. You are not supposed to work for that company or work in that place doing that thing for a long time. You are just supposed to be there for maybe 2-3 years or 5 years, learn what you have to learn from that experience, from that company, and then move on. But then when you move on, you are actually more prepared or better prepared to get better positions, better opportunities. Okay, so that's the biggest takeaway from this story today. So think about your career strategically And depending on where you are in your working life, be okay with maybe accepting an offer that is not the best offer, but strategically speaking, it is a good offer for you to develop more skills and learn so that you can get better things in the future. And that's all I have for today's episode, guys. I hope you enjoyed listening to my story of how I got my first job in English, fully in English. I'll never forget it. And thank you so much for listening until now. Don't forget to check out my conversation club. The registrations are still open, but they're going to close very soon because classes begin now in August. And also check out my pronunciation course, which is still available on pre-sale. All the links are here in the description of the video, in the pinned comment below, and also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts in the show notes. All right? Guys, I'm Thiago. I'm signing off. Thank you very much, and I'll be talking to you very soon in the next video. Bye-bye.